Hello everyone, it's Seth, probably better known as Saffron Olive, and we're back here today for another top 5 countdown from Kaladesh, joined again by Chaz. How you doing today, Chaz?
I'm doing well. How's it going, Seth?
I'm doing well. I'm super excited for today because we're talking about kind of the key card type today from Kaladesh. It's Artifact Day to break down the top 5 artifacts from the set, and there are some super good ones. Because there's so many artifacts in the set, we had a hard time breaking the list down to just 5, so we actually have not one but 2 honorable mentions, but they're kind of connected. So we wanted to mention the rare vehicles, essentially, specifically Cultivator's Caravan and Fleetwheel Cruiser. So Chaz, what do you think about these vehicles that came in just outside our top 5?
They're both really viable in their own right, and we couldn't just Fleetwheel Cruiser and the Cultivator's Caravan kind of play different roles, but I mean, basically the Cultivator's Caravan, it's already like a Chromatic Lantern, which most people would normally play anyway, whether it be in EDH, and it obviously could be good enough in Standard. And then you get the added upside of later, when you don't need the mana anymore, it just starts to become a 5/5 beater that you can just keep crewing with creatures that you play that can't attack, so you just turn them into 5/5s essentially, and you don't really have to worry about it. So I think that's a really interesting dynamic for a mana rock. And Fleetwheel Cruiser, I don't really think needs a huge explanation. It's a very greatly costed, aggressive card that turns into a creature on its own the first turn. It kind of reminds me of like a mini Ball Lightning or a Timbermare, Thundermare, how, you know, if you remember those cards, if you're older like me. But just, again, really greatly self-contained vehicle that even, again, a low crew cost, you can just keep reusing later on in the game.
Yeah, I've talked about vehicles, and we've talked about vehicles a few times in different places, and I've mentioned before that for me, what I really want to see in vehicles is vehicles that do something on their own, even when they're not crewed, and that's one of the reasons I'm super excited about both of these cards. Cultivator Caravan, as a 3-mana rock that adds mana of any color, is already a pretty playable card. We've seen Darksteel Ingot show up in decks. We've seen, you mentioned Chromatic Lantern, definitely very good in Commander, but it has this huge upside of not only being a mana rock, but then suddenly being a 5/5. Fleetwheel Cruiser does the same thing, but in a different way. It enters the battlefield essentially as a creature, so you get in that hasty damage. So even if you have an empty board, both of these cards do something, which for me is the big appeal of good vehicles. That's what I want my vehicles to do, and both of these fit the bill. So anyway, let's move on to our actual top 5. Coming in at number 5, we have a Mythic, Aetherworks Marvel. So kind of the big payoff energy card. What do you think of this one, Jazz?
Yeah, it was kind of interesting to see this before. Like, it was probably one of the first cards that we got to see in the Kaladesh, and it was really interesting and it potentially really powerful. And like you said, it seemed like the payoff for energy. So now we had to see, well, what energy cards can we actually get to make this viable? And to me, I think we can get to a point where we can cast Aetherworks Marvel with the energy cost already accounted for by turn 4. I mean, if you look at the Brawler, you have the Harness Lightning, so you might actually be able to get there, and this is not just a card that just comes down and does nothing. You can conceivably play the Aetherworks Marvel and then use its ability on the same turn, and I think that's where we need to be.
Yeah, the part that makes this card really powerful is there's no mana cost attached. When we talked about the demon, yeah, you need energy, but you also need 2 and a black to really activate it and reanimate something. With this, it's all energy, and energy is proven to be fairly easy to make, even incidental. You can play cards that are already good cards, and they just happen to make energy when they enter the battlefield or when something else happens. So I think it's going to be pretty easy to make a deck that can not only activate this on turn 4, but can pretty consistently activate this, where you're every turn, or at least every other turn, getting this like pseudo tutor, bring to light, put things on the battlefield effect. So I think this card has potential to be really good. It does require building around. You can't just stick it in any deck. The downside is it's not one of the self-contained energy cards. We talked about like Bristling Hydra. It produces 3 energy, it uses 3 energy to activate. Aetherworks Marvel doesn't necessarily do that. You're going to need support cards, but in the right deck, you can get a ton of value out of Aetherworks Marvel.
Yep.
Number 4 on our list, we are heading to the world of aggressive artifact creatures with Scrap Heap Scrounger.
Yeah, this is awesome. So we've seen a card similar to this in the past. Seth, you made a great comparison on your Twitter account about Despoiler of Souls and how this is honestly much better. Either this is much better, or Despoiler of Souls was really bad, and I'm kind of leaning towards this just being really good. I think the requirement for the ability is much easier. And it plays so well with the cards around it. Like we talked about the Trafficker, we talked about all these cards that can sacrifice artifacts, and this can kind of bring itself back to trigger all these little triggers like Zulaport Cutthroat, or it's just a reusable resource for the Trafficker or Pia Noir or something like that. I think this can have some really great applications.
Yeah, and one of the most exciting aspects of this card is you don't need to be a heavy black deck. Despoiler, Bloodghast, almost every card that we see like this with the ability to come back from the graveyard has required a really heavy black investment to initially cast it and then also to get it back from the graveyard. As an artifact, in theory, you can be a deck that's just splashing a little bit of black to eventually get this back out of your graveyard and play this as an aggressive 2-drop. A 3/2 for 2 is actually pretty above the curve, especially when you're considering it's an artifact, so you have no mana requirements at all to actually get it on the battlefield, no colored mana requirements. So I think this card is a lot more powerful than the recent versions of this card. It's probably not quite Bloodghast level where it's coming back for free, but it is very good.
Yeah, in older formats, likely, like you said, Bloodghast is probably better. But I mean, in standard, like I said, it has a lot of synergy with and has some great applications with other cards. You even mentioned like Eternal Scourge in one of our other videos. This actually plays really well with that card too. So there's a lot of different cards that can take advantage of a reoccurring creature like this.
Up next, we have a card that I was very tempted to put it number 1. Chad's talked me out of it. It's an artifact. He does like the card too, though. We have Filgry Familiar, and this card to me is just one of my favorite cards in the set. I love value, and this card is just overloaded with value. What do you think, Chaz?
Yeah, I mean, what's not to like? It's a little like fox familiar. I mean, it's like a little fox invention. It looks awesome. And it's right up your alley. So this is like doing everything you could possibly ever want to do in Magic. You're gaining life, you're drawing cards, you have a 2/2. It's honestly not even that bad. And decks were already playing like Pilgrim's Eye for the emerge cost, like in Standard. We've seen this back in Pro Tours, and this just seems straight up better. I mean, yeah, you don't get the evasive creature in Pilgrim's Eye, but the downside of Pilgrim's Eye is it dies to so many different removal spells, especially Liliana the Last Hope. This doesn't. So I think this is going to easily replace or more often, like you're going to want to play more of these copies than Pilgrim's Eye in those decks like Team Emerge. And in decks that aren't specifically using this to use as a merge, it's just a great value creature that you can just throw out there. It stalls out an attacker. You're gaining some life to stabilize or to keep yourself in the game for the longer haul, and it replaces itself.
Yeah, to me this is kind of walking the line between a colorless Kitchen Finks in some ways and also a Solemn Simulacrum. Two very powerful constructed playable cards, and I think this card is just super good. It obviously has emerge applications like you were talking about. I think it will often replace Pilgrim's Eye in those decks, but it's also just a fine roadblock in a control-y deck. You can use it against aggro decks to gain back life in a manner similar to Kitchen Finks in Modern, for example. Just getting 2 life and this roadblock chump blocker that doesn't cost you a card is very powerful. It does a lot of stuff for a low mana cost, and being colorless means you can play it in any deck, which is a big advantage over something like Kitchen Fink. So I am super excited for this card in Standard. In Modern, probably not as much, although maybe in a deck that really cares about artifacts it could have a spot, but I'm excited to jam this card in a lot of different decks.
It's cute, it's cuddly, it's value. I mean, what's not to love?
Well, number 2 on our list, we're moving up to the Mythic rarity for the Mythic vehicle from the set, Sky Sovereign Console Flagship. So, the new Inferno Titan, Chaz?
Not quite, but it's still pretty good. I mean, Inferno Titan is Inferno Titan. I don't think many cards stand up to that cycle, but this does a pretty good job. I mean, the Crew 3 is actually like the cutoff, I think, for me when it comes to a viable vehicle. And I think it's low enough that most creatures can just get inside and crew it, and you're getting a lot of value. I mean, it just seems great for 5 mana. You get a come into play ability rather than you just having to attack with it, so you get that ability. And it doesn't hit players, but it can deal with planeswalkers and creatures. And 3, like we said, Seth, it's kind of that magical number. It deals with Reflector Mage, it deals with Spell Quellers, it deals with powered down Sylvan Advocates. So it really takes care of the key cards in this format. And then you get another trigger when it attacks, and it's a huge evasive creature.
Yeah, this card has a lot going on. It's another one of those vehicles that does something when it enters the battlefield. And as far as the payoff, a 6/5 flyer that gets to Fiery Impulse something when it attacks is actually really good. That's going to help shoot down opposing flyers, shoots down a lot of really relevant creatures, and being able to randomly hit a Chandra or a Nissa is a pretty big deal as well. So I think this card is very good. I think it's most likely a 1 or 2 of type card, thanks to being legendary, but I think that it's very strong and one of the most pushed for constructed vehicles that we've seen out of Kaladesh.
Yeah, I absolutely agree.
Although Sky Sovereign is pushed, I don't think it's quite the most pushed vehicle for constructed. Number 1 on our list, we're staying with vehicles. We got Smugglers Copter. This card is absurd. What do you think, Chaz?
Card is crazy. I mean, you mentioned push for constructed. When the development team is telling us that they pushed this card specifically for standard, I think that was Sam's article, Sam Stoddard. Am I pronouncing that right?
Yep.
Said this is kind of their vehicle that they definitely wanted to see constructed play, and I think it will. I mean, a curve of Exemplar into Smugglers Copter into even like a Dapala on turn 3 just is really scary already.
Yeah, this card it's a 3/3 flyer for 2. It has the lowest possible crew cost, so literally any creature, any servo token or Thopter token can crew it up and fly it in. And then being able to loot is actually really relevant in a world with Delirium and graveyard-based synergies like that. Plus, it's just so far above the curve as a 3/3 flyer for 2 mana. So I am very excited for this card. I think it's definitely a major part of the artifact aggro deck we've mentioned before, with Toolcraft Exemplar, with the Nerd Ape. Curving those into Smuggler's Copter seems incredibly powerful. It just generates so much value. I love this card. I'm really excited to play with it.
Yeah, me too. I mean, it's just great. And like you said, super push. I mean, it even gets past some of the 3 drops we see in Standard already. It doesn't lose into combat with some of the premier cards in Standard right now, like Spell Queller, and just it basically just wins in a lot of combat with against those cards. So I'm really excited too.
And even defensively, you leave it back, your opponent can't Reflector Mage it, Sorcery Speed removal doesn't hit it, then you just tap a creature and you Stonewall or actually kill Spell Quellers and cards like that would otherwise be problematic. So not only does it work great on offense because of the looting, it triggers when it blocks as well, so you can take and chump or kill a Spell Queller and you still get to loot. The card is just so good.
This honestly should have been the Mythic. but I can understand why Sky is Sovereign just being so immense is the mythic. But this is really the star of the vehicle. This is the star of the car show right here. So, so yeah, really, really great.
All right, well, that has been our top 5 plus a couple honorable mention vehicles for Kaladesh. So let us know in the comments where you agree, where you disagree. We'll be back tomorrow with another one. So Chaz, thanks for hanging out. I will talk to you tomorrow.
Yeah, this is great. We are Audi 5000 here. Oh, man.
Oh, D-.
Yeah, okay. Fair enough. Take care, everyone.